My 15-year career ended. The boss's nephew took my place. As I cleared my desk, one sudden phone call altered my whole world. I watched the company I built, brick by brick, burn to the ground. They kicked me out, replaced me with the boss's nephew, and believed their shiny new future could stand without its very foundation. They were dead wrong. The air in conference room B was thick with a palpable dread that Tuesday morning. 10 o'clock on the dot. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed downtown Portland glistening under a pale, indifferent sky. Leather chairs, a giant monitor dominating the wall, the perfect stage for a corporate execution. I walked in 5 minutes early, just like I had for every single meeting for the past 15 years. Professional to the end, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me that I already knew what was coming. They couldn't even meet my gaze. For people total, David, the CEO, Sarah, the VP of Operations, some HR guy named Mark I'd never seen before, and then there he was, the new hire, who somehow already had executive-level access. That unsettling, electric silence hung in the air, the kind that precedes an irreversible professional destruction. The unspoken rule is that everyone knows what's about to happen except the person it's happening to. Except I knew. I had known for weeks, honestly. You don't dedicate 15 years of your life to a place without developing an instinct for these things. The sudden hushed conversations that stopped dead when I walked by, the meetings I was abruptly no longer invited to, the consultants brought in to scrutinize the very processes I had built from scratch. And then, the printed folders laid out on the conference table. They never printed anything unless the decision was already locked in, signed off by legal, rubber-stamped by the board. Corporate cowardice in its purest form. Everything was digital until the moment they needed official documentation of your removal. Then suddenly, paper mattered. I sat down across from David, a man I'd worked under for 9 years. We'd celebrated countless product launches together, pulled all-nighters fixing system crashes that threatened major contracts. I'd even spoken at his father's funeral 3 years ago about how proud his dad would have been of the company David had built. Now, he couldn't even look at me. "Ethan," he started, his voice a practiced, sympathetic drone. "This isn't easy for us." It was the same tone he used in damage control press conferences or during quarterly earnings calls when the numbers looked grim. I'd heard him use it on other people countless times. I never imagined I'd be on the receiving end. "Your contributions to Titan Security Group have been significant," he continued, pausing, almost expecting a nod of gratitude or acknowledgement. I gave him nothing. My gaze was fixed on the kid 2 seats down. Not a kid anymore, technically. Ryan Fletcher, David's nephew. 26 years old. Fresh MBA from some coastal business school where networking clearly mattered more than actual competence. 0 field experience. No understanding whatsoever of the complex systems I designed from the ground up over a decade and a half. No comprehension of the intricate infrastructure holding this entire company together. But there he sat. Crisp suit, expensive watch, radiating an air of entitlement, acting like he belonged in a room where real decisions were made. Sarah, the VP, seamlessly jumped in with the corporate script. She was always so good at delivering bad news with a forced smile. "We're restructuring the security division to align with modern business practices. The industry is evolving rapidly, and we need agility at the leadership level. Fresh perspectives that can drive innovation." Translation: they wanted someone younger who wouldn't dare push back when they made monumentally stupid decisions. Ryan had a pristine, brand-new notebook open in front of him. Probably bought it yesterday. He was furiously taking notes, as if this was some fascinating business school case study. As if watching someone get fired was a golden learning opportunity, jotting down observations on how to terminate employees. The sheer arrogance was almost impressive. I didn't bother asking why. I already knew. The past 4 months had made it painfully obvious. The meetings I was suddenly excluded from, where they discussed restructuring. The outside consultants questioning processes I'd built, processes that actually worked. The random audits of departments I managed, desperate to find flaws they could use as justification. I'd stayed late fixing their mistakes. Trained 8 team leads over the years. maintained the entire security architecture, protecting 3 product lines and $17 million in annual contracts. None of that registered when the people at the top needed to prove they could modernize. They wrapped it all in business jargon, streamlining operations, agile methodology, next-generation thinking, leveraging emerging talent. All of it translated to the same thing: replace the steady, experienced hand with something shiny and new. The HR guy, Mark, slid the severance package across the table. A standard manila folder. 6 months' salary, extended health benefits through the end of the year. A non-compete clause I could have fought but wouldn't bother with. And of course, the confidentiality agreement about company operations, client lists, and proprietary systems. "We appreciate everything you've done for Titan Security Group," Mark recited, reading from a script he'd probably used 20 times before on other people the company decided were disposable. "This decision reflects our strategic direction going forward, not your individual performance." Right. Sure. That's why Ryan was sitting there, struggling to suppress a smirk. That's why David still couldn't make eye contact. Strategic direction always seemed to involve the boss's nephew landing a director position he didn't earn. I stood up, took the folder. "Understood. Ethan, we hope this can be an amicable transition," Sarah said, her voice dripping with artificial sincerity. "You've been a valued member of our team, and we want to honor that." Valued enough to fire, apparently. I walked towards the door. Ryan stood up, extending his hand. "Looking forward to learning from the systems you built." Big shoes to fill. I stared at his outstretched hand, didn't take it. Just walked past him as if he were part of the furniture. Let him stand there looking stupid with his arm hanging in the air. A small victory, but I'd take it. The elevator ride down felt impossibly long. Not because I was embarrassed, I wasn't. I was eerily calm, which, frankly, bothered me a little. Maybe some part of me had been ready for this. I'd seen the shift over the past year, how they'd started dismissing my input during strategy meetings, talking over me in client presentations, how David would smile and nod when I raised concerns about security vulnerabilities, then completely ignore everything I said and do whatever looked better on a PowerPoint slide. 3 months ago, I'd warned them about critical gaps in the authentication protocol for the new client portal Ryan had championed. He'd been in that meeting, fresh off his first week, acting like his MBA gave him system architecture expertise. He'd suggested we streamline the login process for user experience, removing security layers because clients complained about too many verification steps. I explained, calmly and professionally, exactly why those layers existed, how they prevented unauthorized access, how removing them would create vulnerabilities hackers could exploit in about 15 minutes, how we'd lose client trust and probably face lawsuits when the inevitable breach happened. David had thanked me for my input, then asked Ryan to prepare a proposal for the streamlined version. That's when I knew for certain. They no longer wanted expertise. They wanted compliance. Someone who would smile, nod, and implement whatever made the PowerPoints look good for investors. And I'd never been good at following stupid orders just because someone with a fancy title gave them. My office was already packed when I got there. A small space on the 3rd floor, maybe 10 by 12 feet. One window facing the parking lot. Someone had done it for me. Professional courtesy, they probably called it. Corporate efficiency, more likely. Everything I owned at Titan, neatly fitting into a single cardboard box with the company logo on the side. They'd even left a sticky note. Personal items. Gloria. Like I was a case file being processed, not someone who'd given this place 15 years of 60-hour weeks. Inside that box was my entire career at Titan. A coffee mug from the 10-year anniversary event. A framed photo of me and the original security team from 2009, back when we were 12 people crammed into a warehouse office with exposed pipes and questionable wiring. A certificate from the International Association for Data Protection for excellence in security architecture. My desktop nameplate that proudly read Ethan Hayes, Director of Security Infrastructure. Some pens. A stress ball shaped like a server rack that one of the junior engineers had given me as a joke after I'd stayed up 72 hours straight fixing a catastrophic system failure. That was it. 15 years reduced to objects that fit in a box you could carry with both hands. But they missed something. A folder locked in my bottom drawer. Documentation I'd accumulated over the years. Internal audits they'd commissioned then buried. Security gap assessments I'd written that never got addressed because fixing problems costs money. Risk reports outlining exactly what would happen if they kept cutting corners. Incident logs from near-miss breaches I'd caught and fixed at 2 in the morning before they became disasters. I'd started keeping these records about 6 years in. Not for any particular reason at first, just professional habit. Documentation instinct. Cover your work. Track your recommendations. Maintain evidence that you did your job right. But over time, they became proof that I'd been trying to prevent the exact problems they kept creating. The 2016 internal audit, showing critical vulnerabilities in the client data portal. I'd recommended immediate fixes. Management said it would impact user experience. They wanted smooth and fast, they didn't care about secure. 2 months later, we had a sophisticated breach attempt targeting exactly those vulnerabilities. I caught it at 3 in the morning because I'd built redundant monitoring systems they didn't even know about. Fixed it before any data got compromised. Got a thank you email from David. No mention of the recommendations they'd ignored. The 2018 infrastructure risk assessment, outlining in painful detail what would happen if they kept using outdated server architecture. I'd shown them the math. Upgrading would cost $400,000. Waiting for a failure would cost millions in lost contracts and reputation damage. They said the upgrade was too expensive, delayed it another year. When the catastrophic failure happened, exactly like I'd predicted, I fixed it over a 72-hour weekend, sleeping 4 hours total. Got a $200 gift card to a steakhouse as a thank you. The 2020 staffing memo about hiring more qualified security analysts instead of cutting the division budget by 18%. They cut it anyway. I absorbed the workload. Trained junior people fresh out of college to handle what should have been senior-level positions. Made it work, because that's what I always did. Made their bad decisions work anyway. All of it documented. All of it ignored. All of it still sitting in that locked folder. I grabbed it, slid it into my bag. If they noticed it was missing, they'd never admit it. Too many questions about why I had that documentation in the first place. Why I'd felt the need to protect myself from my own employer. Why I didn't trust them to make the right calls. Before leaving, I looked around the office one more time. I'd spent more waking hours here than in my own apartment some years. Late nights fixing critical issues while everyone else was home sleeping. Early mornings before anyone else arrived, because that's when systems were quiet and you could actually think without interruptions. Weekends running tests and building protocols that kept this company profitable. The walls were blank now. They'd already removed everything I'd hung up. Pictures of the security team at various company events. Whiteboard filled with protocol diagrams and system architecture notes. A map showing our client locations across the Pacific Northwest. All gone. Erased like I'd never even been there. I picked up the box, walked to the elevator, and rode down in silence. The security guard at the front desk looked deeply uncomfortable when I handed over my access badge. Michael. Good guy. Worked here almost as long as I had. We talked about his daughter's soccer team, his wife's new job teaching middle school, his plans to retire in 5 years and move somewhere warm. Sorry, man, he muttered, scanning the badge to deactivate it in the system. This whole thing is garbage. Not your call, I said. You're just doing your job. Still garbage. You built this place. I appreciated that small, quiet moment of recognition. That this whole situation was profoundly wrong. That firing the person who held everything together was corporate stupidity at its finest. Outside, Portland was doing that thing where it can't quite decide between rain and sunshine. Gray clouds, occasional drizzle, light breaking through in random spots. It felt appropriate somehow. I sat in my car for maybe 5 minutes. Didn't cry. Didn't punch the steering wheel. Didn't call anyone to vent. Just sat there, processing what had happened and what came next. They probably expected me to panic. Start sending out resumes immediately. Network frantically. Make desperate phone calls. Take the first decent offer that came along because bills don't stop when you lose your job, and survival means swallowing your pride. But I'd been preparing for something like this without fully realizing it. I'd kept my skills sharp, stayed current on industry developments, built a reputation outside of Titan through conference presentations and side consulting work I'd done on weekends, published articles in security journals, helped smaller companies shore up their defenses pro bono because I genuinely cared about doing the work right. I had 6 months of severance, savings that could cover another 6 months after that if needed. No kids, no mortgage, low overhead. I wasn't desperate, and that changed everything. The work I'd done at Titan spoke for itself to anyone who understood the industry. Every major contract they'd won in the past decade had my fingerprints all over it. Every disaster they'd avoided was because I'd built systems that caught problems before they became catastrophic. They just handed me freedom without realizing it. I drove home to my small apartment in Southeast Portland, 1 bedroom, efficient kitchen, enough space for me, and not much else. Unloaded the box, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and started thinking about what I actually wanted to do next, instead of what I thought I should do. For the first time in 15 years, I could build something exactly the way I knew it should be built. No compromises, no committees, no nephew with an MBA overruling critical technical decisions with hollow marketing speak. While David and Sarah celebrated bringing in fresh talent, they didn't understand the foundation was already cracking. They talked about progress as if it were software you could just download, install over old systems without checking what still works underneath, what dependencies exist, what will break when you change core architecture. But Titan Security Group's reputation hadn't been built on flashy investor presentations or expensive hires with impressive resumes. It had been constructed protocol by protocol, firewall by firewall, during the years when most companies didn't understand that digital security mattered as much as physical security. When executives thought cybersecurity was something you could ignore until it became a problem. I was there when they handed out coffee mugs at 5-year anniversary milestones, like that actually meant something, already running version 3 of the threat detection engine that had saved their contract with the state education department, $470,000 annually. When their first head of technology, a guy named Daniel who'd been hired because he interviewed well and said what they wanted to hear, panicked over a breach attempt in 2013, I was the one who fixed it. Worked through the night, patched the vulnerability, isolated the compromised system, rebuilt security layers, drafted the public statement they released the next morning that made it sound like everything was under control and always had been. Managed the whole crisis while Daniel hid in his office making phone calls to lawyers. They called it luck. I called it understanding your own systems and being competent enough to fix them under pressure. Daniel left 6 months later for a better offer at some startup that failed within a year. I stayed, trained his replacement, then trained that person's replacement 2 years later when they left for more money. I was the constant, the foundation everything else was built on. David's father, Robert Fletcher, the company founder, he had vision. Saw the market need before most people did, understood that security would become critical as businesses moved operations online. But vision without execution is just wishful thinking and good intentions. The company scaled because someone built architecture that didn't collapse when investors showed up demanding quick returns. When management changed every couple years because ambitious people used Titan as a stepping stone to bigger opportunities, I trained 3 generations of security analysts. Wrote the automation protocols for threat response that won us MedSource Corporation, the biggest pharmaceutical client we had. A contract worth $2.1 million annually. I'd spent 4 months customizing our security framework to meet strict healthcare data requirements, HIPAA compliance, encryption standards, access controls that satisfied federal regulators. Presented to their board personally, answered every technical question they threw at me for 2 hours. They signed because they trusted the system I'd built from scratch. I designed the backup protocols that kept everything running during the 2018 server migration. Everyone said it couldn't be done. Too much data, too many active clients, too many simultaneous processes running 24/7. I mapped out the entire migration over 6 weeks. Tested every scenario I could think of. Built redundancy into redundancy. We moved everything over a 3-day weekend. 0 downtime, 0 data loss. Monday morning, clients logged in like nothing had happened. Robert Fletcher pulled me aside after that. Told me I'd saved the company. Said he'd make sure I was taken care of. Promised I'd always have a place at Titan as long as he was alive. He died 9 months later. Massive heart attack at his desk on a Thursday afternoon. David took over. The promise died with his father. It was all me. Every critical system, every major contract, every disaster avoided. I didn't need recognition or awards or my name on press releases. I needed to know the work was solid, that it protected people who trusted us, that it held up under real-world pressure and didn't just look good in demos. They forgot all of it because they never really understood what I did in the first place. To them, I was legacy infrastructure. The guy in the back office who preferred function over flash, who built things that worked instead of things that looked impressive. I wasn't someone you put on stage during product launches. Those were David's thing or Sarah's. They had the presence, the polish, the ability to make complex technical concepts sound simple and revolutionary. I was who you called at 3 in the morning when the launch servers crashed, when systems failed, when clients panicked, when the shiny presentation met ugly reality. But when things worked smoothly for too long, people stopped noticing them. When they stopped noticing, they started thinking those things maintained themselves, that anyone could do it, that you're replaceable. That was their fatal mistake. They forgot I wasn't just an employee contributing to projects. I was embedded in the foundation. Every protocol had my thinking in it. Every security layer reflected threats I'd studied for years. Every automated response system had been tested against attack scenarios I'd modeled and wargamed. And while they chased shiny futures and fresh perspectives, they never stopped to consider what would happen when the past walked away. The phone call came 2 days after they fired me. Thursday afternoon, around 2 o'clock. I was at my kitchen table, idly reading through job listings I wasn't particularly excited about. A number I didn't recognize. Seattle area code. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. Curiosity, maybe. Instinct. Mr. Hayes, the voice was professional, measured, not trying too hard, confident, but not aggressive. My name is Alex Cole. I'm calling from Sentinel Defense Solutions. I'd like to speak with you privately if you have a few minutes. Off the record. I knew the name. Sentinel Defense Solutions. A small security firm based out of Seattle. They'd been making noise in certain circles for ethical data protection platforms and autonomous threat response systems. Not flashy, not heavily marketed, but smart. Quiet smart. The kind of smart that doesn't need PR firms and trade show booths because the work speaks for itself. How'd you get my number? I asked. Industry contacts. I heard about your departure from Titan. Thought we might have some mutual interests. You mean you heard I got fired? I heard they made a significant strategic error. There's a difference. That got my attention. What do you want? To buy you coffee and have a conversation tomorrow if you're available. There's a place in the Pearl District. Quiet, good coffee, no pitch, no pressure, just two people who understand security architecture talking about the industry. I thought about saying no. Thought about telling him I was already fielding offers, which was technically true, even if none of them were interesting. Thought about playing hard to get, but I was curious. And honestly, I had nothing but time. Tomorrow works. Send me the address. We met at a small coffee shop off Burnside, the kind of place that takes coffee seriously. Alex was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Sharp eyes, dressed business casual, carried himself like someone who'd earned his position instead of inheriting it. He didn't pitch me. Didn't start with a sales presentation about how great Sentinel was. He just ordered coffee and started asking questions, real ones, about long-tail breach patterns, about automation gaps and permission structures, about balancing security with user experience. Things that proved he understood the actual work instead of just the buzzwords. I've been following your conference presentations for 3 years, he said. The one you did in San Francisco about predictive threat modeling was brilliant. Changed how we think about response protocols. Titan never implemented any of that, I said. Said it was too expensive. Their loss. Alex pulled out a tablet, showed me some architecture diagrams. This is what we're building. security platforms specifically designed for mid-sized companies, organizations between 50 and 500 employees. The ones that can't afford enterprise-level protection, but desperately need it anyway. I studied the diagrams. Good bones, some creative thinking, but gaps everywhere that would become serious problems under real-world conditions. This won't scale, I said, pointing at their threat detection matrix. You're building for best-case scenarios. Actual attacks don't follow best-case patterns. They exploit edge cases you didn't plan for. Alex smiled. That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. You want me to fix your architecture? I want you to help us build it right from the beginning. Not as a consultant. As part of the team. Lead architect, if you're interested. I sat back. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance to build what you've always known should exist, without committees watering it down, without executives who don't understand security making design decisions, without some MBA overruling technical requirements because they look bad on investor slides. That landed hard. He'd done his homework. Knew exactly what I'd been dealing with at Titan. What's the catch? I asked. No catch. Small team, smaller budget than you're used to. We can't match what Titan was paying you, but complete technical authority. You design it, we build it. No interference. I thought about it, sipped my coffee, watched people walk past the window outside. When would you need an answer? Take a week, think about it. Come tour the office if you want. Meet the team. We're not going anywhere. 3 days later, I was sitting in Sentinel's office in downtown Seattle. A modern space, open floor plan, 26 people total. Everyone looked busy. Actually busy, not just performing busy for managers. Alex introduced me to the key team members. Sophia, lead engineer, 42 years old, previously worked for Microsoft. Quiet, competent, asked genuinely good technical questions. 2 senior analysts, both former government security contractors, they knew their stuff. Head of client relations, a guy named Jacob who'd actually read my published articles and asked intelligent questions about implementation. No passengers, no legacy hires collecting paychecks, just pure competence. We want to launch something specifically designed for healthcare providers, Alex explained, walking me through their development roadmap. Hospitals, clinics, medical groups. They have strict compliance requirements, but limited security budgets. We think there's a massive underserved market. I looked at their preliminary designs. Healthcare was complicated. HIPAA requirements, state regulations, patient privacy laws, data retention rules. Most security firms avoided it because the compliance burden was heavy. This is ambitious, I said. That's why we need someone who's actually done it before. He meant MedSource. My pharmaceutical client at Titan. What timeline are you looking at? 6 months to a working prototype, 12 months to full launch, 18 months to profitable. Aggressive, but possible with the right architecture. I want complete technical authority, I stated. No design by committee, no overruling security requirements for marketing reasons. If I say something needs to be done a certain way for security purposes, it gets done that way. Done. And I want equity. Alex didn't hesitate. We can structure that. How much were you thinking? 15%. He counteroffered. 12%, vested over 4 years. Partner track if we hit revenue targets in year 2. I thought about it. Smaller salary than Titan, but equity meant I'd actually own part of what we built. Share in the success instead of just collecting a paycheck. Deal. I started the following Monday. Moved to Seattle that weekend. Found a small apartment in Capitol Hill. Cheap rent, walking distance to the office. Didn't need much space, just somewhere to sleep between work sessions. Spent the first 2 weeks just analyzing their existing systems, finding weak points, identifying what needed rebuilding versus what could be reinforced. The team was good, smart people who knew their specialties. Sophia's engineering work was solid. The analysts understood threat patterns. Jacob knew how to talk to clients without overselling capabilities. But they lacked someone who understood how all the pieces fit together. How security architecture at scale works when you're protecting sensitive data for hundreds of clients simultaneously. How different components interact under load. What breaks first when systems are stressed, where vulnerabilities hide in the connections between otherwise secure components. I designed the core framework over 6 weeks. Long days, weekends. But it was different from Titan. I was building something new instead of maintaining something old. Creating instead of patching. The threat detection logic learned from patterns instead of relying on static rules. Most security systems work like simple if-then statements. If this happens, do that. But real attacks are dynamic. Hackers adapt. Use techniques that haven't been seen before. Our system analyzed behavior patterns. Recognized when something was abnormal, even if it wasn't explicitly defined as a threat. Permission structures could scale from 10 users to 10,000 without breaking. That was critical. Most small company security works fine until the company grows. Then everything collapses because the architecture wasn't designed to scale. We built it right from the beginning. Flexible authentication, role-based access that adapted as organizations expanded. Logging systems that maintained performance even as data volume increased exponentially. Automated response protocols handled most incidents without human intervention. Detected a threat, isolated it, contained it, alerted administrators, all within seconds. But we included override controls for complex situations that needed human judgment. Security can't be completely automated. You need people making decisions when circumstances are unusual. We called it Aegis Protocol. Healthcare-focused, HIPAA-compliant, built specifically for organizations that needed enterprise-level security without enterprise budgets. Everything encrypted, all data stored securely. Audit trails automatically generated for compliance reviews. Backup systems that activated instantly if primary systems failed. Launched in April, started targeting regional clinics and medical groups, dental practices, urgent care centers, physical therapy chains. The organizations Titan ignored because contracts under $500,000 annually weren't worth their sales team's time. Too small to matter to the big players. But there were thousands of them, and they all needed security. They all handled patient data. They all faced compliance requirements and penalties if they got breached. Most of them were using outdated systems or relying on general-purpose security that wasn't designed for healthcare. We offered them something better at a price they could afford. Within 3 months, we had 42 clients. Month 6, 87. All of them paying subscription fees that looked small individually, $20,000 per year, $35,000, $40,000 for larger practices. But volume made it profitable. 42 clients at an average of $30,000 per year was $1.26 million in annual recurring revenue. 87 clients was $2.61 million. Real money. Revenue grew steadily. Word spread through industry networks and professional associations. We weren't competing with Titan directly. Not yet, anyway. We were serving the market segment they'd abandoned as unprofitable, but our reputation started creeping into their territory. Clients would hear about us from other healthcare providers, see our presentations at medical conferences, read case studies about how we'd protected organizations similar to theirs. That's when things got interesting. I started hearing things through old contacts, people I'd trained who were still at Titan. They'd reach out occasionally asking technical questions, complaining about changes Ryan was making, mentioning problems they were running into. Titan was struggling. Nothing catastrophic at first, just a slow bleeding. Client complaints about response times. Security incidents that should have been caught early but weren't. System glitches cascading into bigger problems because nobody understood how the fixes I'd built actually worked. Ryan Fletcher, the golden nephew, had been promoted to Director of Security Infrastructure, my old position, except he didn't understand the systems he'd inherited. Didn't know which protocols could be modified and which ones were load-bearing. Started making changes because they looked cleaner on paper without understanding why things were built the way they were. You can't just rearrange security architecture like furniture. Every component depends on other components. Change one thing without understanding dependencies, and you break 3 other things you didn't know were connected. In July, Titan lost their second biggest client, a regional hospital network, 22 facilities across Oregon and Washington. a contract worth $2.3 million annually. The official reason given was budget restructuring. The real reason, according to someone I used to work with, was that Titan's threat detection had missed 3 separate breach attempts in 5 months. Small attempts, probing attacks that should have been caught instantly by automated systems. Instead, they went undetected for days. The hospital's board got nervous, decided they couldn't risk patient data on security that wasn't catching obvious threats. That same hospital network reached out to Sentinel in August, wanted to know if Aegis protocol could handle their scale. Could we meet their compliance requirements? Did we have references from similar organizations? I personally walked them through the architecture, showed them how our system adapted to medical data requirements, how automated responses worked in high-stakes environments where seconds mattered, how we built redundancy into everything so single points of failure didn't exist. Answered their technical questions for 3 hours. Demonstrated the system handling simulated breach scenarios. Walked through our disaster recovery protocols. We signed them in September. Biggest contract in Sentinel's history. $2.4 million annually. 5-year commitment. I didn't celebrate publicly. Didn't send gloating messages to anyone at Titan, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel incredibly satisfying. The client they'd lost through sheer incompetence had chosen us specifically because we'd built what they actually needed. Titan kept declining. Small things at first. Employee turnover in the security division. Good people leaving. Longer response times on support tickets. Clients quietly not renewing contracts. By November, they'd lost 6 major accounts in 4 months. For a company their size, that was significant. That was market share evaporating. David started making public statements about innovation and evolution. Brought in expensive consultants to analyze their operation. Funny thing about consultants, they're great at identifying problems, terrible at fixing them if the foundation is broken. You can't consultant your way out of technical incompetence. Ryan tried implementing new protocols he'd learned at some industry conference. Automated systems that looked impressive in demos, but collapsed under real-world load. He didn't understand that security isn't about following trends. It's about building things that don't break when everything goes wrong simultaneously. When you're under actual attack from people who know what they're doing. December brought a catastrophic incident. One of Titan's clients, a financial services firm handling retirement accounts, got hit with a ransomware attack, encrypting 40% of their data in 11 hours. Titan systems should have caught it in the first 30 seconds. Should have isolated the threat and shut it down automatically. Instead, it ran for 11 hours before anyone noticed. The firm lost access to client records, transaction histories, compliance documentation, everything. The fallout was nuclear. The financial firm sued Titan for negligence and breach of contract. Industry publications ran stories questioning their competence. Other clients started asking hard questions about security guarantees and liability clauses. David went into crisis mode, hired a PR firm, released carefully worded statements about isolated incidents and additional training measures. It didn't matter. Reputation damage in security is permanent. Once clients stop trusting you, they don't come back. They can't afford to. One breach can destroy their entire business. They need absolute certainty that their security provider knows what they're doing. I watched it all happen from Seattle. Didn't gloat publicly. Didn't trash them in industry forums. Just kept building. Kept improving Aegis protocol. Kept serving clients who needed reliable protection instead of flashy promises. Sentinel grew. By February, we'd expanded to 63 employees. 18 new clients signed in 1 month. Revenue up 340% year-over-year. Alex offered me partner equity, 22% ownership, full partnership in all decisions. I accepted. Now I wasn't just an employee. I was an owner. My success was tied directly to the company's success. Every good decision I made increased the value of something I actually owned. In March, David Fletcher reached out personally. An email sent directly to my Sentinel address. Professional tone. No acknowledgement of how things had ended. Just asked if I'd be interested in consulting for Titan on a contract basis to help stabilize their infrastructure. Offered to pay premium rates for my expertise. I read it twice, thought about it for maybe 10 seconds, then deleted it. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I was building something better with people who valued what I brought. Going backward made zero sense. Why would I help fix the mess they'd created by firing me? Why would I rescue people who'd thrown me away like garbage? 2 weeks later, industry contacts told me Titan was hemorrhaging clients, down 40% from their peak 18 months ago. Ryan Fletcher had been quietly moved to a different role with a meaningless title. They had brought in an outside security director, someone with impressive credentials, but absolutely no knowledge of their specific systems. The new director spent 3 months trying to reverse engineer the architecture I'd built. Trying to figure out why things were designed certain ways, what protocols did what, which systems depended on which others. It didn't work. You can't fix infrastructure you don't understand. Can't modify systems when you don't know what'll break. By June, Titan had lost another 8 clients. Stock price dropped 18%. Board members started asking hard questions about leadership. David Fletcher resigned under pressure. The company got acquired in September. Bought out by a larger security firm for significantly less than their valuation 2 years earlier. Most of the executive team was let go immediately, Ryan Fletcher included. The acquiring company gutted the security division and rebuilt everything from scratch using their own systems. 15 years of infrastructure destroyed in 18 months by people who thought credentials mattered more than competence. Sentinel kept growing, expanded into additional markets, financial services, legal firms, educational institutions, anywhere that needed serious security but couldn't afford the biggest players in the industry. We hired more talent, improved the platform, added features clients actually requested instead of features that looked good in marketing materials. By year 2, we were serving 247 clients across 11 states. Revenue hit $22 million. Started getting acquisition offers ourselves. Companies wanted to buy us. Take our technology and client base. Alex asked what I thought. I said we weren't done building yet. Why sell when we were just getting started? When we were proving that doing the work right actually mattered. 3 years after getting fired from Titan, Sentinel Defense Solutions had become one of the fastest-growing security firms in the Pacific Northwest. 137 employees, over 400 active clients, $46 million in annual revenue. I ran the entire technical division. Built the team from 19 engineers to 63. Designed 3 additional security platforms beyond Aegis Protocol. Won industry awards for innovation and threat detection. Got invited to speak at major conferences where people actually listened because the work spoke for itself. Not because of my title, not because of marketing. Because we'd built systems that worked better than anything else available in our market segment. I never reached back out to anyone from Titan. Never gloated. Never sent screenshots of Sentinel's success to David or Ryan. I didn't need to. The industry is small. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone knew why. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so solid that the people who underestimated you become irrelevant by comparison. David Fletcher reached out one final time. Different email address, more personal. Said he'd made a mistake. Asked if there was any chance we could talk about lessons learned, maybe even explore whether I'd consider coming back in an advisory capacity. I thought about responding. Thought about explaining that the lesson was simple. Don't replace the foundation while the building is still standing. Don't assume fresh faces understand complex systems just because they went to expensive schools. Don't confuse innovation with destruction. Instead, I archived the email and got back to work. If you've ever felt discarded or underestimated, only to rise stronger, what was your turning point? Share your story or just your thoughts on this one in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.